Hey guys, and welcome back to Mad About Skin. You've probably seen in the news, on social media, and in the mainstream press quite a lot of talk recently about sunscreen bans. This has led to a lot of you guys reaching out to me, asking questions, and wanting to know what it means for the sunscreens that we use in our own routines, and how it impacts us as consumers and when we choose to travel. I'm going to break it apart in this video. I'm going to look at what ingredients and sunscreens have been banned, how this is going to impact us, and ultimately what alternatives there are out there if you're traveling to any countries that have implemented these bans and we still want that locked-in sun protection. So if you want to find out a little bit more about these sunscreen bans, keep on watching. So let's start with a little bit of a background to all of this. It's not actually the sunscreens themselves which have been banned, but rather certain ingredients that are commonly found in sunscreen products. The two UV filters, chemical filters, which are normally part of these bans are oxybenzone and octinoxate. I'll leave the spelling of both of those on the screen for you because confusingly, a lot of these chemical UV filters are very similarly pronounced, spelt very similarly. And so if you want to check your own products for these two, I'll leave the spelling there so you can check them against whatever sunscreens you have. Both of these ingredients have been questioned for quite some time, so it should come as no surprise, really, that these two are party to these bans. But it's not actually how they interact with the human body that is the reason for the ban, but rather how they interact with marine life and coral reefs, which has led to certain countries and territories restricting their use. So far, 7 countries, and I'm going to leave a list to them here, have banned outright the sale of products which contain these ingredients. Some of these bans do go a little bit further and include some other filters and some other common ingredients in sunscreens, and I'm going to leave them all linked below, so you can check them out, if you want to work out what you have in your own skincare routine. Whilst 7 doesn't seem a lot, actually all these bans have actually taken place in the last couple of years and they're growing. There's a lot of talk that this might be extended to places such as Australia and some of the really big holiday destinations. This obviously has a huge impact on us as consumers because whilst we might not live in the territories and the places where these bans take place, these are popular holiday destinations. Holidays, do you remember them? Hopefully at some point we might actually be able to go on vacation, on holiday in the future. And so we need to be aware that when we're traveling to these countries and any which might introduce subsequent bans, we need to be prepared as consumers. So let's talk about why they're actually banning these substances. I mentioned before, it actually has nothing to do with how they interact with the human body. A lot of the time, a lot of the sensations and some of the concerns which come out of the use of chemical sunscreens are directed at how they impact our own bodies. I actually covered this in a video, which I'll leave a link to up there because it's definitely worth checking out. However, these bans are all in place because of how they interact with marine life and coral reefs. When these wash off our bodies, we wear them, we go into the water, they wash off our bodies because no sunscreen, however well it's formulated, is entirely waterproof. So it washes into the marine life and then can cause things such as coral bleaching. And coral reefs are so fragile. Just small changes in chemical composition can have a huge impact on them. And they're obviously, as we're aware, disappearing at an alarming rate. And they think beyond global warming, chemical sunscreens, and these filters in particular, can have a significant impact on that. So you've probably heard the term reef safe. This is something which has been used in sunscreens for quite some time. And that's usually meant to indicate that if you're using that sunscreen, the ingredients within it aren't going to have an impact on marine life. However, these bans take it a step further and say, beyond just saying something's reef safe, let's eliminate the use of these products in countries where there are coral reefs and where people interact with coral reefs, and this could be a real problem. This is where these bans come about. Whilst a lot of people, and I used to be in this category, think, how can a small amount of sunscreen that I put on my body and dip my toe into the water a few times a year when I go on holiday have such an impact? Well, the individual doesn't have the impact. It's when it's compounded. And actually everybody using these products, which like I said before, are super common, and then leads to these ingredients finding their way into water systems in huge quantities. The US Park Service actually did a little bit of a study and estimated around 6,000 tons of these chemicals end up in reef environments. And if you think about that, that's a huge impact, which is probably why a lot of these bans have started to come into effect. So how is this actually going to impact us as consumers? Well, first of all, it's interesting to note that none of these bans actually prohibit you bringing these sunscreens into these countries. They just prohibit the sale of them whilst you're there. So any sunscreens which you do take in won't be subject to checks and confiscation. However, I do think, bear in mind, we are all, as consumers, responsible for maintaining our environment and making sure that we're not doing things which damage marine life. I do think we should be respecting these bans and not importing products which are are containing these ingredients when we travel to these countries. We kind of need to respect the values and the wishes of the countries that we holiday or vacation in, and so I think it's really important to be aware as consumers of which countries have applied these bans and make sure that we check our sunscreens before we travel. We also need to think about price as well. So a lot of these territories where they do have these bans are in smaller island communities. Obviously Hawaii is a much larger community, but a lot of them are in smaller island communities. And so if we take our own sunscreen on there and we run out, as we always do, we never pack enough sunscreen. You then have to reach out and buy from a more restricted pool of sunscreens which are available in that country, which means it's more likely to be more expensive, and as a result we might choose to use less or not repurchase any, and so we might scrimp and save on the amount of sunscreen we use, which is always a bad idea. So not only should we check the sunscreen that we're using before we travel, we should always make sure we're packing enough, because we don't want to be caught short in these countries and not have as availability when we go there in terms of the drugstore offerings and the price points that we might want to purchase from. So bear that in mind and make sure you take more sunscreen than you maybe plan to, and make sure that you're using the right sunscreen for the laws wherever you're traveling. We also kind of just have to get used to this. Like I said before, it might only be 7 countries at the moment, but this is spreading fast. And if larger countries such as Australia and some of the most popular tourist destinations start implementing similar bans, which I can definitely see happening in the future, we're all going to have to be a bit more aware of the sunscreens we use. So now is a great place to start. Let's be ethical consumers. Let's respect the wishes of these countries, but also let's think about our marine life. And even in those places where there aren't outright bans, maybe we need to be a little bit more conscious about the products we're using. So what can we do? What can we reach for? The simple solution is a mineral sunscreen. I would say if you're planning to go anywhere where you'll be doing some snorkeling, there's a coral reef present, or you know that you'll be swimming in the sea, switch to a mineral sunscreen. I've got you covered, and I did a whole video on my favorite mineral sunscreens, which I'm going to leave a link to there. Check that video out because there's some great recommendations, something for every skin tone, which is really important, because especially if you're darker skinned, you don't want something that's going to leave ashiness and white cast. I've got something for you in that video, and also something for every price point, so you don't feel that you have to overpay for these mineral sunscreens. Beyond that, you can also consider UV protective clothing. I think this is kind of something we often forget as consumers, especially if you're snorkeling or going to be spending a lot of time in the water. Covering up is a great way of minimizing the amount of chemical sunscreens you have to put on the body, but also making sure our skin is protected. There's some great UV clothing out there at the moment. I'll leave some links to my absolute favorite. It's not all that fuddy-duddy stuff that you used to find, you know, decades ago, which nobody wanted to be seen in. So it's actually quite trendy and the sort of things you'd actually be proud to wear. So I think we sometimes just write off UV protective clothing when actually there's some amazing options. I hope soon that we can all travel more freely, we can enjoy our vacations, enjoy our holidays, and we all have to be ready and prepared to have that sunscreen protection locked in and ready to use for when we can. I love exploring new countries, trying new places. The beach is one of my favorite places to be, but I don't think as consumers we should take that as ours to own and our right. We have to protect the environment, and so actually I welcome these bans. Whilst they might be seen as a little bit annoying to people that travel, it's another thing to think about before you travel. Actually, I do think it's doing the right thing and making sure we protect the environment so that generations to come can enjoy it. So I'm fully on board with it, and I don't think it's too much hassle to check our products and think a little bit about our sun protection before we travel. I'll just be switching to a mineral sunscreen, which gives me that protection. I found some great ones I love, so it's no real hassle. And now that a lot of people are moving to mineral sunscreens, the price point is coming down as well, so they're no longer that really expensive luxury product that they used to be. There's some great drugstore and affordable options. I like to go cheap with my sunscreen because I like to lather it on. I like a thick layer to make sure I'm protected, and so I don't want to be spending too much where I feel like I don't want to use as much as I should. Wherever you are in the world, guys, I hope this has given you a little bit of clarity to some things that you might be reading. Sunscreens are not banned. We still need to be using a sunscreen. We just have to be mindful of the ones that we use in relation to the environment that we're enjoying. I hope this has added a bit of clarity to you, and wherever you are in the world, guys, stay safe, stay well, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care. Bye.